It's awesome. So thanks for joining. And what we're going to be having our conversation about is about leadership. Like at the end of the day, it all rises and falls on leadership. And uniquely, most everyone in this room or most everyone at this conference is in a unique leadership position within your organization. So to have this conversation, we invited a few of our nonprofit partners. At Chick-fil-A, we've developed a partnership with each of the nonprofits that you see here on the stage. And so we're going to dive into some leadership discussion with these great leaders. But before we get started, why don't you guys just briefly introduce yourself and what you do?
Jeanette Lee, I'm with Junior Achievement USA out of Colorado Springs, and I am their Vice President of Development. So I have the privilege of walking with potential partners to hear what their strategic objectives are and see how we can overlay JA on that and impact lives together.
Hi, I'm Melanie Upshaw with Convoy of Hope, and I'm a procurement director, so I also have the privilege of working with partners and donors who want to come alongside us and help support us in our initiatives.
I'm Jackie Suggitt. I'm with Refed. We are a nonprofit focused on food waste, so I hope you ate all of your lunch before coming to this meeting today. And I lead our capital innovation and engagement teams, so all of our external programmatic work at Refed.
I'm Kyle Waide. I'm the CEO of the Atlanta Community Foodbank, which is a part of the Feeding America Network. We serve 29 counties here in Metro Atlanta and North Georgia. This year we'll distribute about $270 million worth of food and resources to families facing food insecurity across our community, and I'm excited for the conversation.
That's great. And maybe just for fun, just to kind of lighten the mood for the room, if we go quickly rapid fire your favorite Chick-fil-A menu item, just to kind of bring it back. Yeah.
Cobb salad.
Cobb salad, all right.
The original chicken sandwich.
Spicy deluxe chicken sandwich.
The fries.
Okay. That's good. Awesome. And I'm with you. I'm original chicken sandwich, but with extra pickles.
I get extra pickles
bring
too,
on the pickles.
so
It's good. Awesome. And just as we get started, we will save some time, hopefully, if I can facilitate okay. We'll save some time at the end for some Q&A, either for online questions or for some questions in the room. So I'm going to go ahead and get started so we can maximize our time. So thinking about strategy and planning, and Jackie, let's start with you. So we've got your organizations. Everyone on the stage has grown, and you've scaled, you've had to grow, and it's not been by chance, but definitely intentional as you grow. So share with us some of just the intentional actions that have helped make this happen, whether it's from operations, leadership, program, whatever that might be.
So Refed started about 7.5 years ago. I joined shortly thereafter when we were a team of 5. We are starting this year as a team of 20, and we're going to end this year as a team of 30. So it's actually a big growth phase for us this year. We are still a relatively small organization, however. And so I think our impact, in part, of course, is limited by the capacity of our team. But I also think that impact can outpace the growth of the physical people on your team too, right? If you're taking some of those important actions. And so I think one that is just very timely and on my mind a lot right now for us is how we can narrow and deepen our work. We received what was for us transformational funding at the end of last year, and there's temptation to go and boil the ocean and do all the things. And that was a very strategic decision with our leadership team, is let's actually narrow and deepen. And so we've spent 5 years learning what we are good at and what we are not good at. And so where we are not good or we're not uniquely adding value into this space, we partner, and we partner hard. We co-fundraise with partners, we kind of share human assets with partners, and we collaborate a lot with the various programs that we run. But then where we are good, that's where we invest the time to get the technology, the talent, to go narrow and deep in our strategy. So there are a million little decisions in that, but I think thematically that's one that we've really been focused on the last year.
Yeah, that's great advice. Hopefully, if you're taking notes, it's probably good. What are you good at? What are you not good at? And maximizing what you're good at. Jim Collins, a great business thinker, would say, create your don't doing list or your stop doing list, maybe individually. So very similar to your organization. It's great. Jeanette, how about you guys in Junior Achievement?
I think there's been a mind shift from transactional partnerships to transformational. And so there's a great TED Talk by Simon Sinek, starting with the why. That was a message this morning. Start with your why. Let me give you a very brief example. If you are working with a corporate liaison for their bowling teams, they do a bowl-a-thon for JA, and you go to them and say, thank you so much. We had 5 teams. What do you think we can do next year to get 6 teams? As opposed to saying, thank you so much. We impacted 85 kiddos. Will you dream big with me? How many kids can we in this partnership impact next year? So that's a shift from transactional to transformational. And I think that that whole starting high, starting with your why, means that you can go from, we invite you into the impact of changing kids' lives, and then it may get down to, and there's a bowl-a-thon, but you can't start at the bowl-a-thon and go up to the why. So start with the why. Watch the Simon Sinek TED Talk on starting with the why.
I agree. It's like 16 minutes. So
Yeah,
I tell people, if you don't have
phenomenal.
time to read the whole book, watch the 16-minute TED Talk. It's fantastic. And Melanie, thinking for you guys at Convoy of Hope, a big organization on multiple countries, and you're having to respond and pivot quickly. So maybe not, I mean, obviously you're very intentional in that, but how are y'all so quick to be able to pivot, respond, react whenever you need to?
Well, we have a saying at Convoy of Hope, and it's the power in the pivot. And so we know there's one constant when disaster hits, and that people need help. But we don't know exactly what that help is going to look like when we arrive. So at that moment when we arrive on that scene, we just have to be flexible and willing to think outside the box and see how best to meet the needs when we arrive. So having a team who knows that's the expectation and has the willingness to behave that way.
Yeah, so it goes back to culture too, like your
It does.
culture of this idea, right? We either say you're going to have a culture by default or a culture by design, and building that into your culture is really huge. That's great. So thinking nonprofits, you're doing this off teams of staff, teams of volunteer. I mean, this is how you get things done, especially as you scale to the size that you guys are. And so retention is a big topic for teams. Like, how do you not have to retrain? Kyle, why don't we start with you at the food bank? What strategies do you guys do to keep people in your organization? How do you keep people engaged?
Yeah, well, one thing is we want to learn from Chick-fil-A about retention, because Chick-fil-A is one of the best records of retention out there for any for-profit or nonprofit organization. But at our organization, we've had some success with this. It's really important for us to keep our team engaged, and in a time when talent is at such a premium for everybody. And I think there are probably 4 C's that I think about when it comes to keeping great people inside the organization. Certainly, always in any retention conversation, we have to think about compensation as a way to be competitive and ensure that we're helping our teams at all levels within the organization be able to meet their needs financially and kind of meet some of their goals financially. We have to stay cognizant of that, even though we're in the nonprofit world and we're competing for talent with a variety of organizations, whether they're for-profit or nonprofit. So we got to constantly be competitive around compensation, but there's a lot more to it than that. I think the second thing is really being clear about our culture and what is central to our culture. That helps us. A big part of retention is hiring the right people in the first place, folks who are going to stick with the organization or are committed to it. And so being clear up front about the core pieces of your culture, the competencies that are really important inside the organization, the values, and making good hiring decisions, and then continuing to reaffirm those pieces of culture and stay true to them throughout an employee's life cycle with the organization helps people stay engaged and committed to the organization. I think the third thing that people are our team has spoken to us a lot about, that we've had to work a lot harder on, is building a career within an organization. That can sometimes be a lot harder inside a nonprofit organization. You have fewer people, there are less verticals for people to move around in, to learn new skills and opportunities. We have embraced in the last few years the principle of skills-based hiring to really inform all of our sort of talent development efforts inside the food bank. And that has allowed us to be more creative in considering candidates for different kinds of roles across the organization. It's led to more mobility both laterally and vertically within the organization, and has created a lot of energy among our team about, hey, I'm not just here working in this job, I'm building a career inside an organization that I already love because of the culture. And then I think the last thing, and maybe the most important thing, is we've got to demonstrate constantly how much we care about people inside the organization. And there are a variety of ways to do that, a variety of elements to that. But the culture we're really trying to build at our organization is one that combines a sense of belonging with a sense of accountability, where everyone feels valued for who you are, and we're all empowered to make a difference. And that more we can demonstrate how much we care about people for who they are and what they bring to the organization every day, that makes them much more likely to feel empowered about the accountability piece of that.
Yeah, that's great. So again, that compensation, culture, care, what's the last one? Career pathing. That's good. And then can I ask one follow-up question? You said skills-based hiring. Maybe somebody's in the room like, I don't know what you're talking about.
So, and this is within the context of our diversity, equity, and inclusion practices as an organization. Historically, I think we often think about hiring through a lens of credentials, or have you worked specifically for X number of years in a job that is exactly the same kind of job that you're hiring for. And so if you're hiring for a fundraising professional, for example, you're looking for people who have spent 5 to 7 years or whatever it is in a fundraising role, and you've got a college degree, et cetera. And so that is going to naturally exclude a lot of people who might have other skills that are really relevant to that role that could make them a valuable candidate. And so instead of credentialing or years of experience in a particular job category, what we have embraced is skills-based hiring, where we define what are the skills that are central for every role inside the organization, and then how do we, through the interview process, identify what skills somebody has that could make them a great fit for the role, even if they don't have an obvious connection to that role.
Sure.
And then we back that up also in the way we coach and develop people by coaching folks around skills, in particular, less so around did you meet this metric or that metric. Obviously those things are important, but we're focusing all of our performance management stuff around here are the skills that are important for you today, the skills that will be important for you in the next role. How are we growing those skills?
That's awesome. Very helpful. Thanks. Melanie, kind of the same thing. We've gotten to know a few Convoy of Hope folks, and they've been around for a while. Like it's, you've got great retention at your staff. So what are you guys doing that might be similar or different?
So to build upon what Kyle said, I think it does definitely start at your hiring process, and what you definitely need to have the skills for the job. And really, I think it's important to identify people's passion and their purpose and make sure that aligns with your mission. So when you can plant people in their purpose and they're passionate about it, everyone wins because they're going to be excited about the work that they're doing. And then I think Convoy of Hope does a great job of showing care for their employees. So we do that by showing them how valuable they are through hosting weekly chapels. So it's a time to pour into people since they've been pouring out all week. And then it also creates an opportunity for us to engage with people on our team that we may not get to on a daily basis. But then they're very generous to us. So they fully pay for our health benefits. They are generous with their PTO. And then we recently started offering paid paternity and maternity leave. So I think knowing what's important to your people, having that balance between family and work, really helps establish that we recognize you as not only someone who's doing work for us, but we value you on a personal level as well, too.
Oh, that's great. And then Kyle mentioned this a little bit about coaching and developing. But Jeanette, when you think about, as a nonprofit leader, sometimes you're getting great professionals. They've gone through this career. Sometimes you get people with a lot of passion, without a lot of experience, but they're sold in. They believe in what they're doing. Sometimes we get a lot of younger employees in nonprofit space. So how do you navigate hiring? And then what do you do to develop your people for the long-term success of the organization?
I think this builds greatly on what Kyle said. So we use a competency-based approach, which is the skills-based, and market values. We don't want people to think, oh, you're coming to nonprofit, you're going to be paid, you're going to need 3 other jobs, et cetera. but so they have confidence. The 5 top reasons or things that people look for when they are looking for a job: passion. Let's see if I can get all 5. Passion, job security, benefits, relationships, and flexibility. So kind of knowing that that's what generally is being looked for, to incorporate that in the conversations you have. Once there's a hire, we use something called predictive index, which is a skills-based tool. The beauty of using a tool like that is that it immediately sets a conversation from an external review of you. And the questions are very weird. You can't cheat because the questions are too weird. But it gives you a synopsis of, this is saying, here's how you like to work. Here's how you are motivated. And so to use that tool to begin the conversation with that new employee sets an incredible foundation of listening to them and then responding to what they're saying. Do you like to do presentations? Oh, you turned white. Okay, we're not going to put you on the presentations committee. But hearing what's important to them and then building upon that. I think also it's at JA, the culture, because we're a national organization and at the USA office, we serve 102 areas. And so part of the onboarding is purposefully making them known and however they're comfortable. We have town halls, we introduce them. But we don't say a lot about their background. We say, they love horseback riding because we want to have those open conversations from somebody from a cross-functional team to say, oh, I've been part of horseback riding or whatever. So there's a very defined onboarding purpose so that they meet people cross-functionally. They know the CEO. As soon as possible, we're either on a Teams call or if we're in 2 or 3 times a year, we're all together to make sure they meet the CEO, that the CEO knows their name. And it's important to him too. So just hearing what's important to them and taking very purposeful steps so that when they know the first day, here's your computer and here's our help desk number. And you're important. We welcome you. And how can we help you day to day?
Showing care again.
Yeah.
Intentionally, for sure. Jackie, we talked a little bit earlier. You guys, your organization, probably like some of you all, you're hybrid, completely hybrid. You're all over the country. There's no maybe centralized place that commonly you meet together. So we've talked a lot about culture just in all this conversation. How do you guys keep that in a hybrid environment? What are some of the best practices that you guys are doing as a remote team?
Yeah, great question. How many people here operate in hybrid or remote teams? Is this relevant? Okay, yep. Okay, lots of relevancy here. So we've been fully remote as a team since 2018, so before it was cool or necessary by COVID. But so we actually built intentionally that way, and it actually went back to hiring and being able to get the right talent that we wanted for the organization. But I actually think there's an important difference between hybrid and remote that's also important. So if you are operating in a hybrid organization where you actually have people at the same time in an office and participating remotely, there's some really important just kind of equity and recognition scenarios that you have to run through as far as how to really purposely engage the people that are not in the room in conversations that are happening in a room. That's not necessarily an inherent behavior that we have as humans. And I think also you need to set expectations about what is required versus optional for that in-person time. If you are fully remote or primarily remote, I think there's a lot of tools and best practices that are available now. I think it is 100% worth it to invest in project management and communication tools that actually enable your team to function real time as if you were in an office a little bit. In-person time is very important as well, and that I know can be limiting depending on the size of your organization, but we're spread across the country. We get together as a full team twice a year, and then every one of our leadership team members are empowered to convene their teams once a year as well, to have that in person. And it is work hard, play hard. We are definitely getting work done. We are also definitely doing a lot of not work during that time together. But there are also ways you can really, I think, prioritize the virtual time that you have. Again, there are really great tools out there to enable virtual engagement with your teams. We just had a virtual chocolate tasting last week as a team, as like a team building opportunity, and it was wonderful. But the last thing I'll say, I think perhaps most important of all, is it really requires building a culture built with high trust. Because inherently, if you're working remotely, people are going to work in their own time zones. They're going to work based on their own time. Many of them are going to be working from home, where there may also be distractions. And it has to be not the exception, but the rule, that there is trust, that the work gets done in that environment. I think that's really what enables people in a guilt-free way to engage in the way that we engage in a remote work environment. And we have to train our managers to manage their teams that way, with that high trust being first and foremost as well.
No, that's awesome. Thanks. Jeanette, you guys are pretty remote as well. Anything else you'd add?
We are. And there's been some learning curves. One example, that to build off what Jackie said, we did a Christmas cookie decorating party. We sent a cookie decorating kit to everybody. They weren't allowed to open it until we were all on screen together, and then we painted and ate our cookies together. I think when we're talking about just on our day-to-day scenario, there's a couple of key things. Remembering the celebrations. So glad we're here this week. Remembering the celebrations, because you're kind of working in a silo, even if you're on a team. And remembering to stop, to pause, and to remember the mission. We often, we're going so quickly, and we're doing things for so many other people, but we need to remember why we're doing what we're doing. So we do have mission moments on our team calls. Everybody on the team is encouraged to go and volunteer. It can be for JA or something else, but to bring back the stories. One of my favorite stories, and I'll share this because you can have a meeting that just makes you go sideways, and then it's got a long day ahead. Oh, great, we have a team meeting. And then I had the opportunity to share, okay, I went to volunteer at JA Finance Park, which is where the kids learn some life lessons, and then they have to balance a budget. And this young woman, this young girl, came up to my colleague and I afterwards, clutching her papers, and said, "Are these papers really mine? Can I take these home?" And we were like, "Absolutely. This experience was for you." And she said, "I'm 14. I have a baby. We live with my mom. I'm taking this home, and my mom and I are going to make a budget." 3 generations were impacted that day. And so if you're in a kind of a sideways mood and you get on screen, we have to have cameras on during our team calls, because we've got to read faces. And you're kind of like, ugh, wish this was over. And then you hear a story like that. That's why we do what we do. So remember the mission. Keep that focused.
Yeah, that's good. I think we all get so busy, forget this actual lives that we're touching. So
Yeah.
it's a good reminder. So a lot of us are like in executive type roles in the room, or you work and interface with your board a lot, and that's something that sometimes I think is mostly the blessing. I serve on a lot of boards, so hopefully you feel like it's the best part of your year, or multiple times a year. But the reality is sometimes there can be tension between the board and the executive. And so Kyle, why don't you? I mean, you've got I think a good board. You've got our CEO on your board, so hopefully he doesn't give you too much trouble. But what have you learned about the complexity of leading and that tension between running your organization and helping lead and work with your board?
Yeah, this is a great question and very timely right now. I think a lot of nonprofit organizations, and I'm sure for-profit organizations too, coming out of the pandemic, have seen some challenges within their boards where the connectivity and culture of the board itself was impacted by the disruption created by the pandemic. And there's good data on this out there from Board Source and other sources that show how boards had some challenges that they are needing to address today. So I think we have a great board at the Atlanta Community Food Bank. And we experienced some of those challenges coming out of the pandemic where we were super busy on the front line responding to the crisis. We weren't meeting in person with our board in the way that we had been. And the conversations we were having with the board were more focused on just how we were dealing with the crisis every day. And we kind of needed the board to leave us alone. In the midst of that, the board was very appreciative of everything we were doing, and they kind of got disengaged, which is reflective of what lots of people are dealing with. How we have leaned into that and what has helped us build a great board prior to the pandemic and now again, I think are three core things. So first of all, you've got to have good alignment with the board around a number of important questions. You have to have alignment around strategy. You have to have alignment around what success really means for the organization. You have to have alignment around risk and what kind of risks the organization is willing to take, and being very explicit and working on with the board around those key alignment questions makes the relationship between me and the board a lot easier to navigate. If we have a lack of alignment on different understandings about what success means, what our long-term strategy looks like, what our level of risk is that we're willing to undertake, then we're going to end up in difficult conversations. We, secondly, work really hard on role clarity between the board and management. And by the way, in working on these things, it's not just like me sending out a memo. At a retreat, when we have a board retreat, a big part of the retreat is about the board talking about the board and their role and how they do their work and what their role is. And so we actually did an exercise where we went through a whole bunch of questions around different responsibilities for the organization. What's the board's responsibility, what's management's responsibility, and what's a shared responsibility, and got good clarity around all of those things, documented it, and that's helped us have conversations with new board members, as well as when we get out of sync sometimes on those questions, go back to that exercise and say, hey, this is what we said about whose this responsibility belongs to, and let's make sure we stay true to that. So role clarity is really critical, and then and I think my board is really great in understanding that their job is not about operational execution. That's my job and the team's job. Their job is around managing risk, holding me accountable, understanding other key governance questions for the organization. Third, I think, area around this is transparency. And so once we got good alignment around what matters, what's important, what our goals are, we have good role clarity. It's that I'm communicating with the board and the board's communicating to me very transparently around all those topics. So when things aren't going well or where we see risk on the horizon, it's my job to communicate very transparently and openly about that challenge. An example of that would be right now, many nonprofits are kind of looking out into the future at a financial cliff where we've kind of grown through the pandemic. There are a lot of resources that have enabled that. Those resources are dissipating now, and we've got a sustainability issue that we've got to navigate. We had a very explicit conversation with the board around that challenge, even though it's really 3 or 4 years out before we get there, so that we begin to prepare for it now. And having that transparent conversation, whether it's around that or, hey, we're going to be behind on fundraising this year or whatever it might be, is really critical to maintaining that healthy relationship with the board and maintaining trust with the board.
That's great. Yeah, I like I said, I serve on several boards. I would say a board retreat as a board member is really helpful, where you spend time working on what's the board's role and clearly defining that. Clarity is kind, really is helpful. So, great. And then another thing of just kind of leadership positions is in nonprofits, we all have to wear a lot of hats. Like I worked in the nonprofit world for 7 years before coming on to the Chick-fil-A side of things, and everyone's kind of doing everything. So, Melanie, why don't we start with you? How do you determine what's most important? How do you help decide priorities? How do others in your organizations do that?
Yeah, I think it's easy for leaders to just think it all falls on their shoulders, but some of the most effective leadership we can have is if you sit back and really discern what is it only that I can do? And then allow your people and your team to do the things that they can do. And it's sometimes easy, I know, to say it's just faster if I do it. But if we're willing to train and pour into our people, because in reality, we all want to grow. So if we're going to continue to grow, it's not sustainable for us to keep doing everything on our own. And it really is investing in our people to allow them to do meaningful work. Because at the end of the day, we all want to go home knowing that we did something meaningful. And when we allow others to join us on that mission, it increases that emotional connection to the organization. And it really, I think, aids in our retention as well, too.
That's good. I think as leaders, sometimes we're tempted to pass off the easy tasks. But to combine even two things y'all said, like high trust and high challenge. And when you can pass off high trust, high challenge tasks and responsibilities, definitely can engage for sure. That's great. Jeanette, anything you'd add to that?
I was just going to repeat the trust.
No.
You know the phrase, if mama ain't happy, ain't nobody happy? Well, if the boss, the leader, is taking on everything, it impacts everything. It impacts your team. It impacts his home, your home. The domino effect is not good. And so what are some tangible steps? Can you talk to your leadership team and ask, what do you want to grow in? And see what you can truly take off of your plate and give to them. And it could be that they job shadow you, that they go on visits with you. Everybody on your team in a nonprofit is a fundraiser. Everybody needs to be that vision carrier and caster. And so equip them to be that in those specifics. But ask them, what do you want to grow in? Oh, I have a meeting next week, you're coming with me. So it's building that trust, but also taking care of yourself as a leader.
That's good. We're going to get to more of that later, too, because I think that's super important. Kyle, one more quick question for you is I think through our time walking through your facility, and I remember looking at your wall of staff. Y'all have some very long-tenured staff. You took over a founder leader or a leader that was around for a long time. So how do you plan for succession in an organization like that, where when someone does leave that's been around for a long time, it leaves seemingly big gaps? So how do you guys plan for succession and continue your community impact even with organizational changes?
Sure, this is a really hard problem, I think, for smaller organizations in particular, where you just have less sort of depth. It's harder to build that depth within a smaller organization, so it's really important, therefore, to be thinking about it. I think to think about succession planning, you want to be thinking both about the sort of short term, how do we just keep things going when we have transition, and to think about the sort of long term problem of making sure you continually have the talent in place to do what you're trying to do strategically as an organization. So on the short-term piece in particular, part of what really helps us navigate a transition so that the work we're trying to do keeps getting moved forward in the right way starts with great alignment and prioritization within the organization. When someone moves on, whether it's at a CEO role or at any role down through the organization, it obviously reduces bandwidth in the near term, and we've got to be very clear about what are the most important things, what are our priorities, and that responsibilities for driving those priorities have been clearly articulated. I say all the time, we have to understand the difference between glass balls and rubber balls, understanding which things we can let go and which things we can't. And having clarity about that helps in transition in particular for people in real time so that they can, keep moving forward the things that have to move forward and then deprioritize things that can be backburnered for other times. And that can't be a decision that I'm making for everybody. It's got to be decisions that people can make in real time, which requires upfront clarity around prioritization and alignment around that. And then longer term, I think succession planning is just a process that you have to think about explicitly and intentionally. And so part of what we're trying to get better at as an organization is to, on the one hand, really be clear about for every person in the organization, here's kind of where you are, here's the skills that you have, here are the skills that you got to grow and develop to be ready for the next role, and to give people an opportunity to work on those skills so that they're ready to move into that next role when succession is needed. And that includes me, and it includes everybody within the organization and every role inside it. It also means that we have to be thinking, particularly for senior level roles who are candidates for moving into not just a specific position, but a variety of positions within the organization, that we could be intentional about developing right now and ensure that we consider for those roles when they come open. And as part of that, to be open and transparent with folks about their potential for those future responsibilities. I think when we're not transparent and upfront about that, people make assumptions, right? So they make assumptions that I'm not a candidate for that next step in my career inside the organization, and then they get itchy and start looking around, and all of a sudden you've lost great talent. The more you can be explicit with people about, hey, there's no plans for this right now, but eventually there are going to be opportunities, and here are some things we're thinking about for you. What are you thinking about? What are your goals? Having those intentional conversations with folks is really important. Last thing I would say on this succession question is, in my role, it's important for me to talk about my own succession and to have that conversation with the board regularly. I don't have any plans, but things can change, and so as an organization, we've got to be prepared for that possibility, and that the board has a good process in place for what will happen in that eventuality, both short-term and long-term, and that we're transparent and upfront and clear with the members of my leadership team about where they fall within that succession plan. So that discipline is something that we tee up every year within the board, that we have a clear succession plan for this year, should it be needed, and that we refresh it on an annual basis.
That's awesome. Thanks. Super helpful. So, Jackie, I'm going to come to you. Thinking through the demands that you guys all have, and we've got demands of like your personal health, your personal well-being, and you even kind of mentioned you could get pinged at any time of the night, depending on what time zones people are working in. You got the growth of your organizations and mixed within this layer of like community impact. So, I mean, there's three strands constantly pulling at you. So how do you balance those three kind of constant needs?
This reminds me a little bit back of, the college conundrum of good sleep, good grades, good friends, pick two, right? It's like the general rule. And it's a similar, I think, dynamic we feel sometimes where how do you choose between personal health, organizational health, and community impact? And maybe 2 points I'll make. And one is they're all important, obviously, but if personal health isn't there, then sustainable business growth and sustainable community impact don't happen, right? That's been a theme, I think, actually, of a lot of our comments today has been the personal health of those that are leading the organization. The second, maybe related point to that, I think, is that balance is a tricky word. We could probably spend most of this panel debating whether balance is in fact possible, but let's pretend it is for a second. And balance, I think, actually looks different, though, for everyone, and it can look different for us at different stages in our career. I currently have 3 toddlers at home, so balance for me right now means logging off at 4:30 p.m. to pick up my kids and have dinner with them, and then maybe logging back on at 9 and sending a Slack message, but being clear that that's not the expectation that my team is responding at 9 p.m. So I think we have to acknowledge that balance is going to look different across the organization, but we also run organizations, and so business growth and business performance is really important and is not something that can be sacrificed. So I think that the challenge then is how can we structure the expectations and the requirements of the business performance. Those are appropriate to have, but how can we structure those in a way where our employees and associates can be fulfilling them flexibly and have flexibility within the framework, so to speak, of how they are meeting those expectations, when they're meeting those expectations, how the work is getting done. And so if balance is or is not possible, maybe remains up for debate, but I think if we can prioritize personal health and allow for personal health to be achieved flexibly within the organizational framework that we build, I think that's where we can hope to have success.
That's good. Yeah, and part of our jobs as leaders is to balance the tension and all of that, right?
Yeah. And leading, I think leading with that, right? Being comfortable saying, I do have young kids at home. I'm still going to log off at 4:30 p.m., right? And I think setting that tone, I have a manager who also has kids, and I think just setting that tone, the way that she's done that has empowered me to set it on my team as well. And so I think leading by example is really important. Yeah,
that's awesome. And then thinking our journey, kind of just as, some of us are leading much larger organizations, but Kyle, why don't we start with you? If you think back or think about different scopes of organizations, if you had any advice for maybe smaller or mid-sized organizations, just a great leadership lesson that you've learned upon your journey that could help someone think about their growth and capacity or their impact.
Sure. So I think in thinking about how we've grown our capacity and impact as an organization, I think one thing, just to go back to what we were just talking about, it's really important for us to be just honest with ourselves about bandwidth and about our need to resource whatever we're trying to do. So sometimes, we think, we should go do these things because they're great ideas to do, but we don't think about the resource implications of doing those things, and we just assume that there's more bandwidth out there that we can go accomplish, and that leads to compromising, personal health and really burning out our team. So I think being honest with ourselves about our existing capacity today and our need to resource that capacity if we're going to grow is a central management challenge for leaders in any context. But that said, I'd say there's sort of three things that have helped us drive our growth. We've quadrupled our output in the community over the last 10 years. So we've been on a huge growth journey. And the first thing I think that we've really focused on goes back to something Jackie was talking about at the very beginning of our conversation here, the sort of Jim Collins hedgehog principle lesson of having clear strategic focus on what you can be great at. And the more you focus on that, the more likely it is you can get real momentum. We work in a nonprofit context. We see all the problems. We want to do all the things to solve all those problems. And it is often a challenge in the nonprofit world in particular that we lose strategic focus. You think about big companies like Chick-fil-A, you all sell sandwiches, right? And you stay laser focused on what you do, and you are a billion-dollar, multi-billion-dollar organization, which is reflected in your capacity around developing people, investing in technology, et cetera. We're a pretty big nonprofit, but we have a $50 million budget, not a $50 billion budget, and that limits our ability to go do bunches of stuff. So the more strategically focused we can be, the more impactful we'll be. Second, I think, and this is in tension with the first thing, is having a big vision can drive growth and capacity. And so in our case, we articulated kind of our kind of big idea of how we wanted to grow, not in 3 years, but in 10 years. And that has been the sort of anchor of what's pulled us forward as an organization for a long time now. So being able to articulate what that big vision is and work backward from it helps you figure out how to get there faster and more sustainably. And then I think the third thing that's really helped us as an organization is just learning from other organizations. Like we've worked really hard at trying to identify what other food banks in our Feeding America network are doing better than we're doing those things, and just go learn from them, be humble about what we are not good at, and just steal great ideas and integrate that into our organization. That has accelerated our growth, accelerated our learning, our capacity, and virtually everything sort of thing that has propelled our growth was an idea that we learned from somebody else. So I think learning from others alongside strategic focus and big vision can really help.
Yeah, that's great. We benchmark a ton, so it's a definitely great way to learn. Melanie, I'll ask you the same thing, and then get your questions ready. I'm going to pause my questions, so if you have any, I want to leave you some time. If not, I've got some more I can keep going on, but if you're sitting on something, we'll get there. Melanie, what about you guys? Any leadership lessons you have for us?
So it's encouraging because several of those points were what I really feel we do well at Convoy of Hope too. But I'd always encourage, a couple of thoughts came to my mind as you were talking and just throughout the sessions this morning is don't put yourself in a position to compare yourself with other people. It's okay to look at people and say, oh, wow, I wish we really want to achieve that next level. How do we do that? But don't compare and then diminish what you're doing because you never want to despise small beginnings because we all started at the beginning and our growth trajectories are all different, but it's all in the timing, in his timing and what we do to set our plans in motion. So I would just say in every moment be thankful where you are and reach out to those people that you would like to see the growth they're seeing or they're doing something similar or maybe you can partner with them because as Jackie said, we can't do everything, so find great partners, and that makes your world better and fuller too.
That's awesome. Okay, never despise small beginnings. I like that. I help orient our new staff at Chick-fil-A, and we'll go to the original Dwarf House. And before we had Chick-fil-A, we had a restaurant called the Dwarf House, and it's still there. But we remind people, like Truett did that. He had a diner on the south side of Atlanta. It was really small. It was called the Dwarf House because it was small. And he grinded it out in there from 1967 to 1946 was when that opened. It wasn't until 1967 that we had the first Chick-fil-A restaurant. And so it's not overnight success. Like don't despise small beginnings.
That's so important.
It's good.
Yep.
It's great. Well, any questions from the room? Yes. And I don't know if we have a mic or anything, but maybe just talk really loud and I'll repeat your question so anyone online can hear.
Okay. I'll try to be loud. My name's Alan. I work with Light from Light. We provide nutrition and healthcare in Haiti. A couple of issues y'all raised we're running into. I think a lot of it resonated when you say nonprofit leaders have to wear a lot of hats. And when you said it's important to get clarity between what the board does, the staff does, and where there's some shared responsibility. For those of us in smaller organizations where we're wearing a lot of different hats and we have a board who's like, hey, let's help take some of this stuff off your plate. What can we help with? I start to feel, on one hand, thankful and on the other hand, nervous that blurs the lines about what the board is supposed to be doing. Do you have any advice for how to navigate that tension of wearing lots of hats but not wanting the board to get out of their lane?
And just for the sake online, real quick, I'm going to recap real fast. Basically, the question of, hey, the board, like if you're wearing a lot of hats and you're trying to offload some things potentially, and the board's saying, hey, let's take stuff off of you, but you're trying to get the board in the right lane, how do you manage that tension?
It's a great question. I think one way to think about it is to think about what are some discrete things that are maybe time-bound sort of tasks that a board member could really help with, right? That could be a particular fundraising project. It could be some sort of IT thing that you're trying to accomplish, where a board member could really sort of facilitate the execution of that. It might be something where you got to go and get an outside resource, maybe get some pro bono, some kind of consulting help, and the board member could just really take that on, drive it to completion, and then it's done, and they can not, have to show up for talent review. Which what you don't want is for a board member to kind of be an ongoing adjunct member of the staff. That's where it gets blurry and uncomfortable. So I think the more you can ask board members where you're in an organization where that's really helping adding capacity and bandwidth to do things that are discrete and sort of time bound, I think that makes it a little bit easier.
That's good. Any other thoughts? That's great. I like that, discrete and time bound. All right. Yeah, next question. We'll go right up here. We've got a microphone now, so that's great. Thanks.
Hi, my name is Chantel Fisher. I'm the founder and CEO of a nonprofit in St. Louis, the Soul Fisher Ministries. And my question is, because since inception, I've always seen us as being a national organization. And I know you all are part of really large, well-established organizations. So what advice would you give for someone when looking to begin to scale up or replicate? What advice would you give a leader? If you've had any experience with that.
I can start with a thought and then look forward to other people building on this. But as I mentioned, I started ReFed back when we were a team of 5, and ReFed actually started as a research project. It was a report that turned into an organization. So there was a lot of questions about what does scale and scope look like, and I'd almost, I think, return and say that in a slightly different way, my first response to the question on the panel today, which was focusing on what you're good at and starting there. And I think it's better to do small scale really well than large scale moderately well, right? And so I think finding what those incremental steps are, whether it's geographical or topical, or what those different levels of scale look like to you, and really feeling confident in the base before then expanding. And that, like I said, that may look geographical, that may instead actually look how you're focusing the work that you're doing. But before we split resources and add more hats to the table, let's make sure all the hats have a home that are already here, right? And then start adding those in as you grow.
I think seek counsel, because JA is an international organization, and outside of the U.S., JA means different things. And so really starting with that advice level, you're not looking for action, you're looking for, I see you as a leader and I see you as experienced. And then have some questions for them. What guidance would you give me? Not to put it into action immediately, but really a fact-seeking time frame to make sure that what you're serving in St. Louis makes sense to serve in fill in the blank, because there's so many cultural differences and governmental differences. But I would suggest you seek counsel with those who are in those other lakes that you can dip your toe in.
That maybe reminded me of one other comment, which we've all heard the saying, dress for the job you want, right? Where I think when we think about bringing in board members or advisors or partners, as I mentioned, we're going from a 20-person organization to a 30-person organization this year. We're not bringing in people that know how to work with 20-person organizations. We're bringing in people who know how to work with 50-person organizations, right? And we want to build out our investment arm in the next year. We're bringing in people who are already running an investment arm. And so I think having people that are already at the next stage ahead of you to come in and maybe guide you through that process as well.
That's good.
The last thing I would just say is, scale ultimately is not a end in itself, right? I mean, scale's an enabler of growing whatever impact it is that you're good at. Every one of our organizations, we have a thing that we do that produces some kind of impact or output. And so we need to make sure we've really clearly articulated the thing. And then the objective is to grow that output. For some of us, the way to do that is to go into other markets or to try to serve more people within an existing market. For others, that scale thing might not result in that kind of growth and impact. It just might dilute your impact. And so I think being clear about what you're trying to do to grow the impact of that's the output of the thing that you do and then ask the question, is scale the path to get there? And if it is, then there are all kind of different ways that you can think about how to go to a different market or build through new kinds of partners or whatever it may be. But it would be a mistake to just assume that's the answer without being clear first on what it is you're trying to grow.
I think JA is a great example of that. I think nationally we used to have 186 offices or JA areas, and now we have 102. And the impact numbers have risen because there was efficiencies needed, there was some things that needed to change. So it's a great example of not scaling affiliates, but deepening impact.
I think we've got time for one more, and I've seen this hand up a couple of times. You right here in the green, second row. Yeah, so maybe we can. That's that there.
I'm Sandy Washington. I'm from Lifestyles of Maryland, and I'm a founder. Our organization is 26 years old, and if I knew then what I know now, I probably wouldn't have started because I would have been too afraid. But I think we've heard about quantitative and qualitative, and when so many funders or folks are looking at impact, where the data, the number of people reached, and when you have a passion, and ours is serving people that are homeless and are underserved, every life makes a difference. And so how do you translate the qualitative, the meaning of that single life, into what people are looking at as how many lives are you touching? I mean, certainly we can find the data, and we're touching thousands of people. The impact on those thousands of people may not be the same as possibly the impact on 5 or 10 of them. So how do you translate that?
I think we heard a little bit about that this morning, and I think it's so important to share your stories. We all have a story to share, and we all love sharing them. So if you can find those great stories of impact and share those and really point out the difference that changing one life can make. Because in the end, we know it's just not one life. It has a generational and community effect. So that life is going to touch the people around it, and you're just going to have the ripple effect. So if you can find a great way to capture great stories and share those, and of course the numbers are still important, but if you can find stories of impact, and especially even ways to document the ripple a little bit, I think that would really go a long way with some of the people who are asking those questions.
That's good.
The data is a bugaboo. So many funders ask the question, even on online applications, how many people will this impact? And then the responses, they vary greatly. JA has different experiences for the kids. We talk about inspiring them. Oh, like I love one story, a young African-American young guy, his teacher noticed that his behavior improved. And she said, why, I love it. Why are you changing? And he said, I don't want you to keep me from my JA day, because that was the first time I ever saw a black man in a suit, and I want to be whatever he is. That's inspire. But then there's deeper experiences in JA that frankly take a lot more time, and it's a deeper time commitment and a deeper impact. How do you explain when they ask for a number on that application? So it's the story.
Yeah. It is challenging because we're part of that too, where you ask, but then sometimes you hear the story. So that's hard. That's really hard to do. So unfortunately, I do see your hand. Unfortunately, I do. We've got to wrap up because we've got our next crew coming in here in like just a minute. But let me just express my thanks to each one of you.
Thank you.
Honestly, as we think about even what we want to try to accomplish, we at Chick-fil-A want to try to accomplish in the world. Like one, we've had a long-standing commitment to education. We give a ton of money to our team member scholarships and helping provide educational opportunities. And JA has been a long-standing educational partner for us, so thank you for that. When we think about disasters, when they show up, we want to be there to show care in the communities. And so we've been partnered with others, but Convoy of Hope has come alongside to help be an amazing partner for us in disaster relief. And then when we think about hunger and food waste, we have a deep passion about the fact that, we're the third largest restaurant company in the richest country that's maybe ever existed. But at the same time, we have millions and millions of families suffering with food insecurity. And we think with eliminating our food waste and helping invest in food, we can help solve some of that problem. And so you guys have both been amazing partners to help us in that. So we appreciate all of you guys for taking the time today, but also just for our deep partnership with Chick-fil-A. So thanks for what you do. Can we give it up for our panelists?
Thank you.